Welcome to Farm Charm Chic. I'm Emily. Today's episode is another Christmas in July, and I absolutely love the DIYs I have for you today, and I think you're going to enjoy them too. If you like crafting, DIYs, dupes, hacks, thrift flips, or just creating in general, I would love if you would consider subscribing. If you do like any of today's projects, remember to hit that thumbs up. But let's go make some Christmas DIYs. I want to make a really pretty display with some antique spools, which I don't have any of, so I'm going to create my own using some coasters, some of these Dollar Tree rounds, and then these are just a couple of ends from some bottle brush trees. These are inspired by a DIY my friend Patty from Patty J. Good did last year for Christmas, so I thought I would try my own. Now on these wood rounds from Dollar Tree, they have this hole drilled into them, so I'm just filling that in with some hot glue. You could use some spackling, or you could just leave it if it didn't bother you. Now on the center of my smaller spool, I am just using the end of a foam brush, like the little wooden handle. And for the other two sizes, this is a cardboard tube from the inside of some vinyl that I had with my cutting machine. I just used my handsaw and I cut it down to 2 different lengths. And I'm just using my fingernail file to clean up any of that raw cardboard edge. So that way I have a nice clean edge to work with. And then they will be staggering heights. Kind of hard to tell right here, but you'll see in the end display. These coasters came from Hobby Lobby. They are currently in stock in the fall kitchen area. They're 40% off, so if you're wanting to grab those, I just removed all of the little non-slip stickies on the bottom of them, so that way you have a nice clean surface to work with. When I glued the tubes on, I did use hot glue on all of these, but I will say that I think if I had to do this over again, I would use a little more of a permanent glue, like a Gorilla Glue, maybe some E6000 or a combination. I feel like these will hold fine for one season with the hot glue, but to store them year after year, I feel like maybe a more permanent glue would be a better option for you. So just take note of that. I wanted to have a variation in the stains on all of them, the different colors, the different wood tones, because I feel like when you see displays like at Vintage Market Days or the antique fairs, you see displays of these old spools, there is a lot of variation in the different colors, different types. And so I thought in the different textures even. So I thought having like the beaded edge on the one and the different colors was a really fun, like eye-catching element to them. So now I'm just going to tear some different fabrics. I kind of went with Christmas tones in the fabric, reds, greens. So that way you could really make these for any season if you wanted to keep them out year round. It would be kind of fun to come up with some different colors of fabric. But I just ripped them into strips so you had a really raw edge on these. And that way when you wind them around the different spools, you kind of get that look of that it's tattered and aged and kind of old. And you can see I'm just using a little bit of the hot glue to glue these on. Now this part, the hot glue is fine to use. So I was totally fine with this. I just felt like if you were going to store these and wrap them up, I felt like that hot glue might kind of come unhooked from the spool's edge. So that's why I mentioned that on that portion of the DIY, but getting this fabric on, the hot glue will work just fine. This isn't rocket science as you're doing this. It's fairly simple and easy, and you can watch and see exactly how I do this. But just every couple of times that I wrap it around, I'll put a little dab of glue to kind of help hold that down in place. And then when I get to the very end of the strip, I will glue that one down. And then I go back to the other end of the spool and kind of work my way towards the center, just making sure you're getting full coverage over that entire center piece so you don't see any of that cardboard, which is why I have several strips of fabric that I'm using. That way I can make sure I have the coverage that I want and it looks like it's just kind of leftover scraps left on these vintage spools that we're making. On my middle size of spool, I'm using a red fabric on here. It's kind of a red, almost like candy cane stripe was what it made me think of. And that's what's so fun about these is you can personalize them so much to your own decor and the kind of fabrics that you would like. So the possibilities are endless. Now I'm just using one big long strip of fabric for this size. So it's going to be wrapped a little bit differently than the first one, which is really nice because it kind of gives each of them their own little story to tell or their own little difference. And it's kind of the little touches that you put into your DIYs like this that really drive home that appearance of authenticity, gives them that nice, just the little things always take your projects over the top. So just remember that when you're doing them. Now, when I get this all the way wound up, I just take another piece of that same fabric and I tie it off in the middle. It goes around a couple of times and then I tie it just in a knot, just as if somebody from 100 years ago had a little bit of scraps on this fabric and they just tied it off and left it. On the edge of the fabric where I cut it, I just take my fingernail and kind of fray the edge a little bit so it also has that aged, tattered look instead of having a fresh cut look on it. I follow just the exact same steps on this smaller size. Now you could use some smaller strips of fabric on this, but also some ribbon might be really cute, or some embroidery thread, or even some twine to kind of differentiate it even more. I just have a little bit of a different color. This is like a khaki green fabric that I thought tied in really well. Now on the top of these, I just take these bottle brush trees that have been wildly popular over the last few years, and I'm just going to glue them onto the top of each of these. There's 3 different sizes of trees that I put on each one, and as a grouping, this is just going to look absolutely beautiful. Now on that little teeny spool that I have there, I decide to kind of change it up a bit, and I tie a little bit of the red and white baker's thread. Baker's twine, is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. But I just tied that on there to bring a little bit more red, Christmassy, a little bow in there, just like it had been tied up with some thread. I thought it kind of was a fun little element to add to that, so keep that in mind also. But look at how beautiful all 3 of these are together. Just even one of them is going to be beautiful in your decor, but to have a grouping like this, and maybe you already have some of these spools sitting around that you could do something like this with, but these trees are so popular to kind of stack on different things in your winter and Christmas decor, and I just thought this would be such a fun way to display these. I'm excited to have these sitting on my shelf, scattered with some different winter and Christmas decor amongst them. What do you guys think of these? Is this something that you would try? Today's video is part of a really fun Christmas in July collaboration. It's hosted by Liana from Liana DIY and guest hosted by Tracy from Country Charm by Tracy. There's going to be a playlist link down in my description box as well as pinned in my comments. When you click on that, it's going to take you right over to the playlist and play everybody's video for you. So as well as Liana and Tracy, there's also Lori Bly DIY, DIY with Amber, and DIY Next Door, and they all have amazingly fun, beautiful Christmas DIYs for you to get all of those fun Christmas in July juices flowing. If you are new or joining us from the playlist, welcome. I hope you love the projects that you're seeing today. Let's get right back into making more Christmas DIYs. I've seen a lot of these really beautiful woodland, almost Christmas trees to be used for display, like tabletop Christmas trees. And I wanted to try and create my own. And I'm just using, this is just some of the reindeer moss that I'm going to cut up into some really small pieces. I'm just using a cookie sheet here to kind of contain the mess. And then even after I cut it, I'll cut it even more, just really, really fine that you want this. Now I'm just taking one of these Christmas tree forms that you can pick up at any craft store. Dollar Tree has some smaller ones that you could use. And rather than using hot glue, I just use some of the Beacon's craft glue. And I'm just going to kind of roll this into that reindeer moss that I cut and cover the entire tree. I just work in small sections, and you can see here I will go back in and trim it so it's not so bushy around the edges, and so that way it's kind of a nice sleek form. You can see this is what it looks like once I get all of the tree covered, and it took me 3 bags of the reindeer moss to cover this. Now this is a bag of potpourri I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It has some beautiful pine cones in it, but it has the most amazing smell, and you can see here all of the different pieces. I kind of categorized it so I knew what I was working with. Now I made a kissing ball last year doing this exact same technique, and it was wildly popular. It was so fun, and the scent that it brought into my home, the beautiful potpourri smell, was amazing. So I thought it would be fun to kind of have another piece that I could put on display to have as you walked by, get that beautiful smell. So I'm just going to put some pine cones on here, just using hot glue now that I've got the reindeer moss all the way around that styrofoam. You're going to be okay to use the hot glue and not melt your cone or your form here. So I just put one little one up at the top, so I knew that was just the perfect size. And then I take my bigger pine cones and I start at the bottom, and I'm just going to work my way up. And you're just going to sporadically glue these on. There's no real rhyme or reason. You're just kind of working with the bigger pine cones on the bottom and working up to smaller pine cones at the top of your cone, the tree form. And it's going to look something like this here. So not the prettiest yet, but you can kind of see what I'm going for. Now, to get some of those little glue webs that you get, the little strings, I just use my heat tool to kind of melt those away. So now there's these little like chestnuts, I'm gonna guess that they are, maybe, I don't know, these little pieces that are in the potpourri. I'm going to sporadically glue those in as well. So depending on what kind of potpourri you use, or you find you may or may not have these pieces, so this would be totally optional, or you could use something else. And then I just have a lot of other greenery. These are just some picks from Dollar Tree, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, JoAnns, just a bunch of different Christmas picks that I have. You can even see to the right, one of them is a wreath that I had that I really liked the color of the greenery on. And I'm just going to glue this in all of those open areas here. So I will just stick a skewer in, make a little hole in that styrofoam. I will use some hot glue on the end of my pick to help stick it in there. It will kind of melt that styrofoam as you stick it in, but that helps it get a really good hold once that completely dries in there. These are very, very sturdy, and it's going to store really well. And as I was making this, I had my kids, like a couple of them came downstairs, and the first thing they were like, what is that delightful smell? Like they could smell the potpourri even from just walking in the room from working with this. So it's just such a fun way to bring a good Christmas scent into your home and have it be, just kind of a secret. Like nobody knows where it's really coming from, that you glued potpourri to a tree. Every once in a while, go ahead and set your tree up and kind of spin it around, look at it from different angles and see if you've got any holes anywhere, and just make sure that you're keeping that traditional like triangle shape of the tree, so that you're putting your bigger pieces of greenery at the bottom, and as you work your way up to the top, they're gradually getting shorter and smaller, so that way you just keep that, and you don't compromise the form of that tree, so you keep that shape. And I just kind of will spin this around and look at it. You can see down to the right, I cut some of my pieces really small to stick in there, but you can make this as full as you want, which I suggest doing because it's absolutely beautiful, the fuller that these are. And you can see there are some wispy little different kind of picks that I've put in there that do kind of stick out a little bit further, and that's totally fine. I suggest doing that. But for the most part, you're just wanting to keep your generalized shape of that tree. But oh my gosh, you guys, look at how beautiful this is. If you find these on Pottery Barn's website or even Kirkland's website, they're hundreds of dollars. They're so expensive. And here you've made a beautiful one that not only looks beautiful, but smells amazing. I think this would be such a fun piece to have to put out at the beginning of your Christmas decorating season, your holiday decorating season, and have it up all the way through winter. It's going to last all season long, and I think this is just beautiful. What do you guys think of this one? I have these wooden mitten pieces here, and you can find wooden mitten cutouts at like Dollar Tree, at the craft store, online, Amazon, I've seen them. So I just took a plain wood pair and gave them a green coat of paint, just what matches my decor for Christmas. So you could do them in any color, bright green, forest green, do them red, blue, whatever color, you get my point there. But I'm just taking some spackling in a little cup here and mixing some paint into it. I want to make the fluff on these mittens look really textured and fluffy, nice. I just wanted to do something to help that part stand out rather than just have it be like typical white paint. So I'm kind of just going in a stippling motion up and down. And I'll do this like 3 or 4 times to make sure this texture is really thick on here, letting it dry really well in between each coat since it is so thick. I do use my heat tool to kind of help dry it in between coats, but you can kind of see I just take a bunch out of my cup, my mixture that I've made there, and then I just start spreading it around just in that stippling motion there. And I also turn it over. I only do 1 layer on the back since these are going to be hanging probably against a wall or somewhere. You probably won't see the back, but just in case you want there to look like it's cohesive. For this step, I just sprayed some water onto my brush that I had, and I'm just gently tapping it against my finger to have the paint do a splatter around. I thought this was just kind of fun, maybe look like little snowflakes were on the mitten. And then I went around it with a fingernail file, just use a finger sander, whatever, because I just want to add a little bit of aging to this. That's my style. If you don't like the distressing, of course, you guys know, do what works best for you. But I really do think that sometimes sanding around the edges and adding these little touches is what takes and elevates these pieces to a little bit of a different level. So even if you don't do this step with the antiquing wax around to make it look aged, I still would even maybe sand around the edge just to give it like a little bit more of a textured look, kind of add a little bit more visual interest. But again, it's totally up to you. I take the antiquing wax here and I'm just kind of gently rubbing it over the mitten to kind of help it have a little bit more of an antique look as well. Now to embellish these, I took some twine here and I wrapped it around my finger 2 times so it was like a double bow. And then I just take another piece of twine. In this case, I'm using a smaller piece of twine and I'm just tying it in the middle. I like to use the smaller twine when I tie it off just because it's easier to tie and kind of work in that little small of an area. And so I just tie that off and then snip all of that off so you can't see any of the small ends, and I trim the ends of my larger bow. And then I'm just going to decide where I want to place everything here. Now I have these little wire cutters here, what these are. I got these at Home Depot or Lowe's, I think actually, one of the two, but you can find them either one. This is the Cobalt brand and they work so well when you're working with florals, and I get so many questions about these, but I also use this pair here. These are jewelry like snippers that I got, and I think you can find them just in the jewelry section at your craft store. They're nice when you need to butt up against something to trim it flush. So that's when I like to use those. And so sometimes you'll see me use them back and forth, and you guys always ask questions about them. So I thought I'd maybe try and explain a little bit about the difference between the two there. Now that I've decided where I want those, I just use some hot glue to place it down, and we're gonna festive these up a little bit. And I'm just gonna add a little Mod Podge to where the snow is, just lightly, just kind of hitting those high raised areas, maybe down into a little bit of those little valleys there of where I stippled all of that texture on. And I'm just gonna lightly sprinkle a little bit of glitter. There's a little glitter on the florals that I used, so I thought that it would just really be kind of fun to have that sparkle. I know I've said this before in some of my Christmas DIYs, but if there's ever a time for glitter, I feel like Christmas is it, and I don't love it over the top, but every once in a while it does just kind of add that extra little touch to a piece that really makes it literally shine. So I think that I didn't overdo it, just enough that you have to see it, and it just looks really cute. Now I have this fencing wire. We use this on our farm. I've told you guys several times how I stole this out of my husband's truck because I loved how aged it looked because it had been sitting out forever and everything. So I'm just using some of this. To be honest, I wish I had like a thinner gauge wire. I don't even know what gauge wire this is. It's just what we use when we do fences on our farm. And it works really well, but I felt like in this particular project, I wish I could manipulate it a little bit better and easier, that it was a little hard for me to kind of get strung between these two. But I just stick it through the little hole that's cut out on the mittens, and then I just use some pliers to wrap it around to kind of give it that end so it's not going to come back out of the stocking. It's not a stocking, it's a mitten. I don't know why I called it a stocking. Anyhow, and I just kind of twist that around and then bend it so the mittens will hang the correct way. But if you even just twine, I think would work really well for this. But if you have some wire, a thinner wire, I think is going to work better. I ended up having to corkscrew it just around a pencil like this so the mittens would hang kind of how I wanted them to. Once I did this, it really did kind of solve the problem that I was having. And then I just kind of gave it a curve in the middle so I can hang this from like a peg, or on my china hutch has like little door handles. I thought it would be really cute to kind of hang from those, just kind of hanging off the corner of a shelf maybe. I just think these turned out so dang cute. What do you guys think of these? Are you a fan? I love the texture that ended up on the little cuff of these mittens and a little bit of sparkle you can see. And I think these are kind of like one of those timeless Christmas items that is never going to go out of style, and you can really make them custom to your decor. Thank you so much for joining me today for these Christmas in July DIYs. I am so pleased with how each of these turned out. I think they are all so beautiful in their own way and would bring such a festive touch to anyone's decor. I would love to know which one of these you're going to try and recreate, or if you had a favorite, which one it was. Remember that this is part of a collaboration playlist. That link is in my description box and pinned in my comments. So definitely check out all of the other beautifully talented creators that have joined us for this and all of their fun Christmas in July DIYs. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Happy crafting! If you liked the video that you just saw and you want to keep crafting together, here's another video that you might enjoy. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.